Hey, good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet Subcommittee Council Charities. Please be advised that the meeting is being audio and video recorded and live streamed. I will now explain how the proceedings will work and to confirm that officers attending remotely can be heard. We don't have any officers joining us remotely this evening. Members can activate their microphones using the speak button on the microphone unit, and voting will be conducted with the yes, no, abstain buttons in the usual way. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Okay. Item number 1, election of a chair. Can I please have a nomination to be chair of this meeting of the Cabinet Subcommittee Council Charities?
Can I nominate Councillor Alistair Willoughby?
Okay. And can I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Okay. Is there any objection to Councillor Willoughby being elected chair of this meeting? Okay, I confirm then that Councillor Willoughby is now chair of this committee, the Cabinet Subcommittee Council Charities.
Okay. Just carry on with the rest of the meeting. So, apologies for absence. We have none. And then item 3, the minutes of 13th of December 2021. Should that be 21 or 22? 21. Thank you. I propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting of the subcommittee held on the 13th of December 2021. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Albert.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay, could we go to a vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to notification of a business. We have none. Chair's announcements. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. Item 6, public participation. We have none. Item 7, annual accounts and returns for council administered charities. Ian Cooper to present. Sorry, Councillor Albert.
Just to note, I don't think it's significant, but I'm one of the council's nominated reps on the King George user group in Hitchin. But I don't think that's a significant or declarable interest for this. But I just thought I'd note that for the record.
Thank you, Councillor Albert.
Thank you, Chair. So this report concerns the land, buildings, and other items that council holds in trusts and therefore holds through charitable trusts. Namely, they are the Gymnasium and Workman's Hall, which is part of the Hitchin Museum and Town Hall, the King George's Field in Hitchin, Smithson's Recreation Ground in Hitchin, and the last one is a collection of artefacts, the Yeomanry and Artillery collection. For each of these, we have to abide with the charity regulations, and therefore do returns each year in relation to those. For those, in all cases, whilst they generate a little bit of income, in the case of the Gymnasium and Workman's Hall, a bit more substantial income, but still not very much. The King George V, a tiny bit of rental income, but overall very little income, and therefore the bulk of the costs of those charities are met by the council. So the council subsidises those for a contribution into each of those charities. Therefore, for each of the charities, there are no assets. There are assets in terms of land value, but there are no assets they can choose what to do with. They just have the land value and that's it. In the case of the artillery collection, there's no land value at all. So essentially the council subsidises each of them. But where the council subsidises that by more than £25,000, that is counted as income to the charity, and therefore in the charity acquisition terms, that puts them in a different bracket or threshold in terms of reporting requirements. So for the two relevant ones, we've got the Workman's Hall and King George V. There's a slightly higher bars we have to submit, and in those cases, as well as the accounts, we have to submit accounts and an annual trustees annual report and answer some questions on that charity, which kind of links back to both the annual report and to the accounts. So for each of the two charities, we've got appendices. So if each of those two charities got appendices covering both the financial statements and the annual report, Appendix 1A and 1B. 2A and 2B is the same for King George V. And then for Smithson's Rec, because it's just the cost of the maintaining that bit of land, you've got Appendix 3A, which just details those transactions. There's no appendices for the artillery collection. There's no transactions attached to it. And then Appendix 4 is the responses to the questions that we need to submit to the Charity Commission in relation to both the Town Hall, Gymnasium and Workman's Hall Trust and for King George Field. Tonight, you are asked to approve all those documents to be submitted to the Charity Commission before they're submitted to the Charity Commission for, again, the £25,000 threshold for the Gymnasium, Workman's Hall Trust and King George's Field. They need to be subjected to external scrutiny. So each year we ask SIAS, with your permission and approval, to review those transactions and sign off that the transactions there are correct and relevant. So that brings us to the recommendations in the report, which are approving these documents attached and approving that SIAS on our behalf undertake that review work.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Albert.
Yeah, couple of things. If you could help us with, Ian, on the Town Hall Gymnasium and Workman's Hall Trust. My assumption is that the what would it be? It feels like quite a sort of a significant sum of money is effectively the book value of the property, the 2.8 million. I'm not sure when we look to either revalue that or indeed how we decided the apportionment between that part of the building and the new parts of the building and so on. And perhaps just on that one, and perhaps then I'll perhaps separately ask the other question around King George. Then how do we decide what in a sense goes through this account as opposed to other things that happen on the site, whether it's events in the town hall or it's other events in the museum and so on? Because clearly, obviously, it's not everything is covered in here. And I've just wanted to understand what is it that how do we decide what that goes through the charity account as opposed to maybe what goes through our general fund account for the town hall and museum.
So to try and answer all those questions, so in relation to the value, it's revalued on a regular basis. So the last evaluation is in 2022, as you'll see from the notes to the accounts. So the evaluation in that year. We haven't revalued again this year, but it's regular evaluation at least every 5 years, but more often if needed. And that's kind of aligned to the council's revaluation thresholds and schedules, and makes sense in terms of its not being sold at any point soon. So therefore it makes sense to kind of revalue it regularly, but not too regularly. In terms of how the asset value is split across the two, part of the valuation process is to allocate the value between the two of them. So the surveyor doing that would be minded to do a valuation separately for this bit of the building. And I wouldn't know the full details, but be based partly on the area, square footage and all those kind of factors, and looking at the different parts of the building and valuing them separately. And similarly for the costs of the building, which obviously you see it's the cost of the building and the events happen in the building rather than the general staff costs, which are more wide, which aren't in there. But those costs are allocated on basically a square foot basis again. So any events happen purely in that little build, all the costs will be in there. And similarly for the income side, we get donations. That's treated a donation in proportion to the overall area, and we try and do it that way. Obviously, try and be as scientific as possible within reason, because the council is subsidising it anyway. that's probably sufficient in terms of making sure that we kind of have integrity there, because it's not as though part of the income is going to the trustees to choose what they do with it, because of the way that the fact the costs always exceed the income it's being generated.
Does that answer your question, Ian? Did you have another question? Sorry.
Yeah, and on the King George accounts, obviously there's funds held there as restricted funds, which I think is now 90,314. Just again to understand, Ian, what where that sort of money's held, and what is it available, if anything, to use for? I mean, what are its restrictions that can be used, and unlike most charities, what's the appropriate level of the balance of that in terms of that? I mean, it clearly doesn't move a great deal in terms of these 2 years, but I mean, is there a appropriate level of balance of funds within the restricted funds? And as I say, obviously, just to understand what if anything that can be those funds could be used for if we did ever need to do so.
Yeah, as they said, they're all linked to the land, buildings, and equipment that's on the site. So if you look at the notes to the accounts, there's note 2, which is the tangible fixed assets. So the value is therefore made up of the net book value of the public conveniences, which are on the site, the building there, and the wheeled sports area and the play area. They are held at depreciated cost, subject to evaluations when necessary, and therefore, on that basis, there's very little you can do with those assets because they're all the values in the assets themselves. It's depreciated cost. The actual value of those assets in resale terms is not that value. You couldn't sell them for that value at all. So yeah, they are just held there because they provide facilities on the overall site. And therefore, as trustees, you have no real say about what you do with them. Again, the council would fund the capital costs of those as they arise. So, if as and when the wheeled sports area needs to be redone or the play area needs to be refreshed, that cost will form the council, and it appears to be a contribution into the charity.
Thank you. Did you want to quickly come back?
Yeah, and sorry, what's one? And then how do we determine the contribution line from North Herts district, which I think was the 29,000 this year and 28,000 last year? I see that obviously it broadly covers the level of the costs of running the field, but I wasn't sure quite how we got to that number and apportioned it.
Yeah, thank you. So it should, I'm looking now, it does exactly match the unrestricted funds, bring those back down to zero. So the costs, for example, if we're looking at the 22-23, the costs of the facility and maintaining it were 29,874. There was £100 of rental income, and therefore the council makes up the difference. We don't need to make up the cost of depreciation because it's not a real cost. There's no need to bring that balance back down to zero. So you make sure the unrestricted funds are balanced at zero, and the restricted funds are a positive balance because of the asset values that are sitting there.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Just a quick question. So that 95,000 or 90,000 as it is now, isn't it? That's the restricted fund, which is the assets. Is that restricted? I just wondered why it's restricted. Is it restricted because you can't sell it?
Essentially, yes. It is funds that sit within the charity that you can't do anything with. They're not funds that you could disperse out for any other purpose because they're tied up in the asset value.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Oh, thank you. In which case, we go to the recommendations of this report. 2.1, that the Charities Subcommittee approves the information required by the Charities Commission for the 4 registered charities so that the returns can be submitted prior to the 31st of January 2024 deadline. 2.2, that the Charities Subcommittee notes the requirement for those charities with gross income of more than £25,000 in their financial year to have their accounts independently examined, and as this applies to King George's Field and Hitchin Town Hall Gymnasium and Workmen's Hall, instructs this to be undertaken for those accounts for 2022 to 2023. This will be undertaken by the Shared Internal Audit Service. Could I have a proposer, please? Ian.
You're happy to propose that recommendation, Chair?
Thank you. And Ruth.
I'm happy to second that proposal.
Thank you. Any debate? No. Okay, in which case we'll go to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll call a close to this meeting. Thank you very much. How do we do?